Good evening. We want to welcome you to the Sunnyside Community Voice, which is a talk show coming from the Sunnyside area of Houston, Texas. Tonight, what we have is we have a panel. We're having a mental health awareness rally. What we wanted to do was bring together a group of people who could give us information concerning mental health, because mental health affects us all in some kind of way. It is either a member of our family, or it is someone that we know, or we have been a victim of a crime from someone with a mental problem. So tonight we come together with a panel of people who can pass on information to us that will be very helpful. And on our panel tonight, we have, and I apologize, let me start from this end here, Sheriff Adrian Garcia.
Great, thank you very much. And anytime we can have a conversation on an important issue like mental illness, it's important to have because there's not an age range, there's not a demographic, there's not a socioeconomic level that's not affected by this situation. And unfortunately, too often we have seen where this issue has been allowed to be criminalized by the lack of attention, the lack of funding by the respective resources, whether federal, state, and at the county level. But it is important that we also recognize that there is opportunity. We have to become creative in how we approach this issue. We have to collaborate. We have to bring resources and partners together. And so it's good to have Judge Crocker here, who has provided leadership from the bench of her position in terms of making sure people that have been brought into the criminal justice system for something that is most defined as a criminal violation, but really, at the end of the day, people come before her not because of the crime they committed, but essentially because they're sick. And so we have to continue to have this dialogue, continue to bring attention to this issue, and find ways to better address this. As a sheriff of Harris County, I'll tell you that 25% on average of the people in my custody are being prescribed some type of psychotropic medication. And that is that's unfortunate. But when I was asking the young lady, I'm sorry, her name escapes me, but Janet, her representing NAMI, we were talking about where is the level of state funding that goes to the respective services as it relates to mental illness. The original proposed state budget had all but effectively gutted the various programs, and it would continue to force the county jail to be the largest mental health provider in the state of Texas. Your voice is needed. Right now, the proposed budget has effectively restored most of the funding, not all of it. Our wish and the advocacy that I was providing alongside Judge Emmett was that, look, we know this is a tough economy. We're not asking you for more, but don't take the little that we have and just make sure that we keep those essential services that we have at this particular time. All of that is important because with veterans returning back from conflict, young people, middle-aged people, elderly, there's no one that isn't necessarily affected at any particular level of our community. But we need to make sure that while the budget is still being debated at the state level, that your voices are heard, that we continue to advocate to the governor to sign a reasonable budget that does not include draconian cuts to the mental health community, so that we can provide those services before people get arrested. I mean, I can't emphasize how much more practical it would be to make sure that people have access to services before they become a member of the criminal justice system. It becomes too complicated and too costly at that particular point. So it becomes a waste of money, a waste of our money, your money, when we allow people to get arrested when they could have been provided services before they ever came to the county jail. So this dialogue is good, it's essential, it's important. I apologize that I have to leave early. I just learned about this today, so I got here as quickly as I could to make sure that that you can at least hear how important this is for all of us to be engaged, because it is an issue that challenges us all. And looking at some of the young people, it's good to have a lot of the young people in this room, because another area, we often think about mental illness as it relates to folks at the more adult age range. But the reality is that within our public school system, there's a lot of young people that are becoming, for lack of better words, disciplinary issues or disciplinary problems. And the school districts are issuing them citations and in some cases even arresting some of these young folks. But at the end of the day, it is because they are developing the early symptoms of some type of mental illness, and yet we're giving them the paddle, for lack of better words, instead of providing them treatment and access to services that they and their families need, so that we can make sure that they continue on to have a productive life. So thank you, Pastor. Thank you all for having this dialogue.
Judge Jan Crocker. Let's give her a hand. Let's show us some love.
Well, I think this is a really good subject to rally about. Can you hear me okay? I think the sheriff has done a really good job of explaining how many people in the criminal justice system have a mental illness. And it is really exciting and really rewarding to work with probationers and defendants who have a mental illness, because the judge sees them when they first come to court, and as they get on their medication and as they begin receiving treatment, you see their personality change and you see them get well, and it is really, really exciting and really, really rewarding. About 75% of the people in the criminal justice system who have a mental illness also have what's called a co-occurring disorder. That means that they're also a substance abuser. And often that's because the person with mental illness is not on their medicine, and so they use drugs to try and self-medicate because they're just so miserable. And what we've learned is that if you get somebody off drugs, the mental illness often gets much better. And also, as the mental illness is treated, often that person will not need drugs. That's not always the case. Some people simply have terrible addictions in addition to a mental illness, but oftentimes those two things can be treated together. Harris County has approved a felony mental health court, and I'll be the judge of that. I've been working with my own probationers since 2003 in a mental health court format. The idea is that when the probationer comes to court, it meets with the judge, there's a lot of encouragement, and that if the judge is personally involved with that probationer, oftentimes they do better. Just like if you watch your children and encourage them or fuss at them or take some disciplinary action whenever they've done wrong, the same thing works with adult probationers. They need to be rewarded and praised when they do well, and sometimes the judge has to put them in jail for what we call jail therapy. Jail is not a great place for somebody with a mental illness, and you only want to use that as a last resort, but it does work for some people. Some people, if you say, now, if you don't go to treatment this week, you're likely to go to jail, they'll show up. And treatment is so important because a person has to become educated about the mental illness, so they recognize the symptoms when they're starting to become ill, and they'll learn how to communicate with their doctors. Sometimes a person will take a medicine for a long period of time, it will work really well, and then that medicine will quit working. And so their entire life, someone with a mental illness has to be aware of managing that mental illness. And the key is to have a great doctor and a great caseworker. When the mental health court gets fully started, and the same month it was approved, it was unanimously approved by the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, Harris County started their hiring freeze, and the county's having horrible financial problems. So now we're looking at the grant route. We applied for our first grant last week. I've been learning the ins and outs of the federal system, and it's a maze, I can tell you. We're working on another grant that's due the end of the month, and the Mental Health Court Foundation has been started to raise private money. So we're going to work really hard at getting it going, and all of the other departments, including the Sheriff's Office, have been very helpful. The District Attorney's Office is very supportive. The new Public Defender is very supportive. So it's going to be a great court when we get it going. We'll take people who have schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, bipolar disorder, anxiety disorders such as post-traumatic stress disorder. A lot of women in the criminal justice system have PTSD because they've been the victim of sexual assault, for example. Also obsessive compulsive disorder. I had one probationer who vacuumed her home 8 and 10 times a day, and she was taking care of little grandchildren. It was very difficult. Also dementia, which is very important as our population gets older. We now are getting older people in the system who are assaulting their caretaker or a family member. People with intellectual disabilities, and there are quite a few of those in the system. They're hard to spot because they don't tell people. They've spent their whole life hiding that, and so it takes some doing to find that out. If you have someone in your family or a friend or a neighbor, I hope you will encourage them to seek an evaluation. There's psychiatrists with Medicaid for people who don't have the funds for private doctor or insurance, so that they can begin to learn about their illness and if they need medicine to get on that medicine. Also, if someone should become aggressive and violent in the neighborhood or in mental illness, there is a special crisis intervention team. It's called CIT, and I've been through their training. It's wonderful. They teach police officers how to talk to people who are mentally ill and who are in crisis to avoid those kind of situations where the person with mental illness is shot or the police officer is shot and hurt. So if you have someone who's mentally ill, ask for a specially trained officer when you call the Sheriff's Department or when you call the Houston Police Department or another agency. It's great to be here with you. I'm so impressed that you all are learning about mental illness. We've learned a lot about it in the past decade, and I want to live to be really, really old. Not that I'm not already really, really old, because I want to see what we're going to learn about the mind and the brain in the coming decades. So anyway, it's great to be here with you. Thank you so much.
It's so wonderful to have you here with us, Judge Crocker. When you were on the show, there was just so much information that we found out just from you being on the show. Now, what I'm going to do is that NAMI is special. That is an organization, but I'm going to give her. I'm going to shift just a little bit. I'm going to go to Pastor Gilmore, because NAMI has some information that I want Jenna to give out to us. But we're gonna go to Pastor Gilmore, and we're going to give over to him right now and let him give us his thoughts on mental health.